You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona, and I am joined today by Rachel Ginza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Before we really get into stuff, we got to talk about something that we have not yet talked about on the show. I realize that's what we do every week is talk about new stuff. This is some, behind the scenes kind of stuff though. Some of you know that we have a Patreon set up to help kind of people who want to support the show. It's called the Society of Strange. You may have also noticed over the course of the last year, as the show has grown, we've started to have more ads on the show, and those actually somewhat help, at least a little bit. We get very little money for them, but they help kind of offset some of the costs of doing the show. Mm-hmm. And as a new bonus that we have now for all of our patrons, some of them already know this because they've seen the announcement over on Patreon, but they are now getting all of our episodes ad-free.
Awesome.
Woo-hoo! So if you don't like the ads, which, hey, I get it, and if you want to support the show and get ad-free episodes, we're actually offering ad-free episodes to every level of support over on Patreon. So we have 3 different levels of support, and you will get ad-free episodes with every single level. Starting with, I think there's the $5 level and going up from there. So we do hope, you will, think about becoming a patron and support the show. It really does help us continue to do what we do. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to belabor the point anymore, but go over to patreon.com/strangebynature, check out what the Society of Strange is all about. And I think, we're going to jump right into it this week. And Rachel, you going to take things off for us here?
Boy, howdy am I.
Oh,
right.
Good.
Excellent. I'm so excited.
All right. So some of the, I would say, more memorable moments of the podcast are when we cover parasites.
Parasites, of course.
Oh, I do love a good parasite episode once in a while.
We all do love that. They just, I would say they give, but they don't. They just keep taking and taking and taking.
That's true. It's funny. Yeah. They're not much of a giver, are they?
No, they're really, they're a giver for us.
I wish there was a word. I wish there was a word for that, for something that only takes.
Are we, hold on.
Are we a parasite on parasites?
On parasites? Because they give to us.
Ooh.
We're going to have to think about that.
This is kind of metaphysical now.
Yeah. So we'll put a pin on that. So there are so many different kinds of parasites, and I know.
Did you put it in formaldehyde before you put a pin in it?
Maybe
Sorry.
That's really good. That was good. What a nerdy joke. I love it.
Jeez. Victoria's talking nerdy to everybody.
Oh. Sorry for interrupting you, Rachel.
You're
Go
fine.
On.
No, you're not.
No. So we're going to cover more parasites in the future, but one that we haven't talked about, at least in a while, has been parasites let me rephrase, parasites that aren't parasitic to humans. So we haven't gone outside of that for a little bit.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
So let's dive in. We're going to go into a brain space for us. I'm going to turn you all into ants. But first, we're going to fly over to either the British Isles or France, whichever one we want. And we're going to shrink down.
Delightful.
And with a little magic, we're going to turn into red ants. Not just any red ants. We're going to shrink down and join a red ant colony of Myrmica sabuleti.
Okay.
Fabuletti.
Sabuletti.
Not quite as cool as Fabulosa, but we'll go for it.
I know. We'll go with it. And in this gorgeous pasture. All right. It's a little chilly, but we're fine. We're going out as a trio of ants.
So specific.
There's a reason. We go out
Okay.
and we're collecting some thyme to bring back and to help feed the colony, help feed the little baby larvae that we have back at the nest. Unfortunately, our queen has just passed away, so we're waiting for the new queen to like emerge or show up.
Except for the coronation ceremony and the state funeral and all that. Yeah.
Didn't know that ants ate thyme. Does it make them like more fragrant?
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Gotta imagine it
Fascinating.
would.
This is not about that. We're going to continue on as our ant cells.
I'm like, that's not where this is going.
No, it is not. We actually, while we're out collecting this thyme, we smell something. And we get a little taste of this honeydew. It's not thyme. And it smells just like a queen.
Oh,
Like a queen ant.
Great.
And we've been looking for one. And we've been nurturing
We have
some.
indeed.
But we don't know where this queen came from and why she's out in the pasture by herself.
Yeah, can we trust her though? That seems kind of sketch.
But it smells
I
just
don't know
like the
about that.
queen. So we have to return her back to the
Okay.
nest. We get a couple of...
Like maybe she wandered off.
Right.
smell is destiny.
Exactly. So we have to bring her back. So we bring her back
Gotcha.
with our other fellow Myrmica sabuletti ants. And we bundle her up and we gather her in our colony in the nest. Okay. She's kind of near where the larvae are because she does need to be fed and everything. We need to be able to cater to her every whim as ants.
Got such a bad feeling about this. There's like one
I have the
ant
feeling
going,
this is not
something seems off.
somehow
Yeah.
actually a queen.
This is not a
Just a
queen.
feeling.
Mm.
Yeah.
As time goes on, the queen just keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Mhm.
Her appetite grows to the point where it's actually hard to keep up with the other ant larvae in the colony, to the point where some of our
This is like
fellow
having a
ants,
teenager at home.
Oh, yeah. I've heard. Some of the other ants are actually feeding her the larvae before they become workers.
Oh my
Because
Oh, that
she's
seems like
taking
a
so much
Hmm.
from us to feed, to like just keep up and keep happy. But
And no one's like, hey, you notice the queen's eating all the babies? Like that just seems
Well-
no? Anyone weird? No, she smells good.
no,
I guess let's keep doing
and
it.
not only does she smell good, I mean, obviously it's the queen. It smells like the queen. It even sounds like a queen ant. So there's some auditory.
I'm sorry, I'm just picturing the Bohemian Rhapsody now. Okay.
How's the eyesight of these ants? They kind of bad
Not
eyesight. Not
I
real
didn't
visual
see anything about that.
creatures.
Not super visual. No, they go more for
Pretty dark
pheromones
under
and
the ground in
smells
the ant
and
colony, I
It-
suppose.
sound.
It is famously dark underground, yeah.
Yeah. So because it smells and sounds like the queen, it has to be the queen, right?
Right.
So
I mean, no, clearly.
Well, right, especially how I started this, right? Months go by.
Yeah.
And the colony becomes weaker as less larvae
Yeah.
emerge or survive. The queen
Yeah.
wraps herself up for some reason in this silk, and she hibernates for 6 weeks in June. Wild time to hibernate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And then she
What could
emerges.
be going
Okay.
on?
I don't know. And then she emerges and crawls
Yes?
out of the nest in the ground and abandons us for nothing.
Oh.
No.
Absolutely wild,
I
right?
knew monarchy was a mistake.
Ugh,
She abdicated.
she straight up abandoned us. The three of us who are left, everyone else is probably dead.
Everyone but us is dead. Yes,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
So, any guesses to what creature could be preying on this ant colony?
A wasp.
Hmm.
I mean, wasp is such a safe bet because like there's just so many wasps, right?
Yeah.
Weirdly, but a cocoon. You said a cocoon?
I said a
Well,
silk
she said
wrapping.
silk.
like silk. You said silk. So like that is weird.
Well, it seems
Um,
likely that it's some kind of insect that just went through metamorphosis, right?
Exactly.
So I
I'm
guess
loving
if
this.
Maybe
it's
it was like a
silk, it
larval
could be like
stage.
some kind of moth.
Mm.
Yeah, like moth. Moth is what I was thinking, but I was that seems crazy. Is it a moth?
You're
Like a caterpillar moth situation?
very close. So close. This is a
Is it a
particular
butterfly?
species of butterfly.
No way.
Oh, parasitic
Yes.
butterfly.
It is a parasitic,
Parasitic
butterfly.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Almost as good as a vampire butterfly.
Right? So, in particular,
Right, yeah, we talked
this
about
is,
that.
oh, we did. This is the large blue butterfly, which
What a creative name.
it's, which is very funny because its wingspan is about 2 inches in
Oh,
total. So, it's not a huge butterfly.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible name.
But it's silvery with blue wings and a series of black dots upon the forewings, which is how you really identify the adults. The caterpillars don't look really anything special. They're kind of like a creamy white brown.
They don't look like ants.
They don't look like ants.
Okay.
But this particular type of parasitism is called ant tending, where you get ants to
makes it
tend
sound
you,
cute.
right? To like take care of you. It's really it's actually pretty common with several different species of butterflies, but this
I had no
particular
idea.
one, right? But this particular species caught my eye, partially because of the queen mimicry. There's several different ways that this butterfly actually infiltrates the nest. One strategy that they have is the cuckoo method, which is very similar, which is what I mostly described to you.
Yeah, totally reminded me of like cuckoos and cowbirds.
Exactly.
Brood parasites, right?
Exactly. There's also a method or a strategy that they use called a predator strategy, where that once they get in, they'll still sound like the queen and everything, or they'll sound like a worker ant and just gorge themselves as a caterpillar, gorge themselves until they get to the right weight and size on ant larvae. But that can also be dangerous. It doesn't seem to be as effective as the cuckoo method, which is fascinating.
Interesting.
But what's really cool too are not only are they preying on this one specific species, for the most part, they'll go for other ant species, other red ant species.
Okay.
But only if the Myrmica sabuleti species is not there and doesn't
So it's just like a
exist
backup plan.
in that particular range that they're in, because they've been reintroduced into the British Isles, but they're found from France all the way through Eurasia into like China and such. So there's a couple there's a couple of other species, but for the most part, they heavily rely on the Myrmica sabuleti species of red ant.
Interesting.
Right? So while they're preying on these ants, they only start preying on the ants and spreading the pheromones and such after their 4th instar. So they start off eating like seeds of various little plants, including thyme plants. And once they are, after their 4th instar, they'll drop to the ground and look for foraging colony or like foraging Myrmica sabuleti ants. Because other ants actually will kill and eat them if they're found within their nest.
They should.
As they should,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
So, but they are specially developed they've evolved into being so particular about what species of ant they go to.
Yeah.
Now, not only all of that, but the large blue butterfly is actually crucial to the habitat around them. So if there's a healthy population of the large blue butterfly, it's actually been shown that other species benefit from the habitat that the large blue butterfly is in, because it requires more diversity. So if you have a good amount of large blue butterfly, odds are the rest of your habitat, your pasture lands and such, are going to have pasque flowers, rare orchids, Even rugged oil beetles are often found
So
in the
they're-
same spot.
They're basically they're an indicator species.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
It's really, really wild, really cool. Thank you for coming on this journey with me and becoming ants. Sorry that
Thank
we
you for taking us.
killed the ant colony.
The whole colony.
But
yeah.
that's kind of how it works
Fascinating.
sometimes. My
But
source,
we and the
yeah.
listeners survived. So
Ah, we did. Congrats. My sources this
most
week.
of them.
Oh, well, yeah. Were an article from The Guardian by Patrick Barkham, Wikipedia, and the Butterfly Conservation Society had excellent resources. That's what I got this
Cool.
week.
Thanks. That was wild.
Yeah.
Hmm.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, it'll be Victoria.
Science.
What is it? Who does it?
Why does it matter?
The Science Night podcast answers these questions by giving scientists a place to tell their story.
We also highlight science news and discoveries that will have you asking, "My God, what have I done?"
What weird thing are we going to talk about this week that involves a frog?
They made an organic robot? Like, didn't they see The Matrix?
Join us every other Friday, wherever you get podcasts, and at SciNight.com.
And we're back. All right, my turn. So, my husband is a huge tennis fan, which means that I get to stay somewhat up to date on what's happening in the tennis world, whether I want to or
Congrats.
not.
Yep. I get that feeling.
Yeah. In particular, he's a really big Rafael Nadal fan. And Nadal actually he's, for those who are not aware, he's like one of the top 3 tennis players in the world, basically.
Oh, cool.
Nadal had been taking a break from professional tennis for almost a year due to some injuries, but he recently played a comeback match in Australia, leading up to the Australian Open, which is played in the second half of January. So Rafa actually, in case you were wondering, Rafa actually won his comeback match against other player Dominic Thiem without too much trouble. But it is possible that Thiem was hampered by reliving a traumatic memory, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. 4 days earlier, Thiem's match against a different player was suspended for 40 minutes due to a snake intrusion onto the tennis court.
40 minutes? For
40
a
minutes.
Snake?
Okay.
It was.
Was it a
Well,
cobra?
they had to call a professional snake catcher to come get
Okay.
the snake because I don't know if you knew this, guys, but there are a lot of venomous snakes in Australia.
You know, I heard
I
about
totally
that.
didn't clock for a minute that they were in Australia.
Yeah,
So that would,
Yeah.
yeah.
that makes a little
Yeah.
more sense. That's fair.
Okay, fine.
I guess.
That's
So-
fair.
Still, 40
Yes.
minutes is a lot. You're Australian.
Well,
it's
they had
fine.
to locate and bring in a professional snake catcher. I mean, there may have been traffic. I don't know.
That's
They don't
pretty- that's
probably
pretty good,
probably
actually.
keep one in the arena just in case.
Excuse me, if there's
They
a
will
professional
now.
snake catcher in the stands, please come on down.
Well, this snake turned out to be an eastern brown snake, which, it so happens, has the second deadliest venom of any land snake in the world. And
Love that.
the third deadliest venom overall, because there's a sea snake in there.
So probably good that they paused the match.
Yeah.
I would say.
Although, let me
guess
tell you,
so.
I watched the video of the snake catcher, and like people were standing real close. Like,
Just walked up and grabbed it.
I mean, no, the snake catcher was keeping his distance. He had a kind of a pole picker upper
I
thing
see,
and
I see.
a bag, but like the other people around were not as far away as I think they needed to be.
When you face death every day, you get a
Ay,
little,
ay,
you
ay,
know.
Anyway, this got me thinking
Death by a
about
tennis ball,
the
I
venomous
guess.
snakes of Australia, which,
Yeah.
notoriously is home to quite a few of them.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, according to the Wikipedia page on venomous snakes, of the 12 most venomous snakes in the world, 9 of them are found in Australia or Australian waters.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Australia, way to go.
Yeah, and of
Truly
those 5 are
one above
endemic
the
to
rest.
Australia. Yeah. So that is measured by the lethality of the venom. Because there's
Wild
different ways
stuff.
of measuring
Yeah.
the dangerousness of snakes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So the most venomous snake in the world is the inland taipan, also Australian, which, gram for gram, deadliest venom in the world among snakes. And in Australia, there are in fact about 200 species of snake total. That includes sea snakes, of which about 100 are venomous. Depending
Ooh.
on what source you're looking at.
Oh,
It's
man.
pretty hard to nail this down. So that's like
Okay.
50%. Another
Mhm.
source said 65% of the Australian snakes are venomous, and about 25 snakes are considered deadly.
At that point, it's best just to assume they're all venomous. You just
Yeah.
give them a wide berth.
So just to give a couple points of comparison here, there are 129 species of snakes in North America, give or take, of which about 21 are venomous. This is like this is vipers and the other kind, like coral snakes and stuff. Because there's like garter snakes that have like really mild venom, and that's not including that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Like the hind fang venomous
Right.
snakes.
Like the hog nose,
okay.
yeah.
But if we're talking about like seriously venomous, 21 North American species. So that's 16%.
And I'm going to guess that like almost all the North American species are all just slight variations on rattlesnakes.
Most of them, other than the cottonmouth and the copperhead and the coral snake.
Yeah.
Right.
And then there's a whole bunch of different rattlesnakes. And in India, which has the most snake bite deaths of any country, there are, again, according to what source you're looking at, around 235 to 300 species of snakes.
Okay.
And again, depending on which source you're looking at, 13, 15, or 60 of them are venomous.
That is a big jump.
Yeah. So that is
more
at
research
things is
needed or
not
something
the
there.
Same.
But that is at most 25% of the snake species in India. Probably less.
Right.
Probably less.
And what was the percentage again for Australia? 60 something? Or-
50 to
50?
65.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's considerably more.
Yeah, and in India, about 4 species are responsible for about 80% of the snake bites. And worldwide, only 10 to 15% of snake species are venomous. So it really is true that Australia has a much bigger proportion of venomous snakes than other
What
places
is
in the world.
happening? Why?
Well, why? And Australia has this reputation, right? It's not just snakes. Australia is sort of notoriously home to a lot of deadly animals from, the blue-ringed octopus, the box jellyfish, the Sydney
Kangaroos.
funnel web spider, koalas. Come on.
The drop bears, come on.
Yeah, those
They'll
drop
get you. You
bears.
watch out.
Saltwater crocodiles, bull sharks living on golf courses.
Yeah.
But as you said, why? Why?
Yeah,
Why is Australia so deadly? It turns out that part of this is hype. I mean, the sea creatures I mentioned are not exclusive to Australia by any means. And, it turns out that the proportion of venomous animals in Australia, other than snakes, is not particularly higher than for other tropical areas of the world.
Okay.
But, Australia's kind of cultivated this reputation, I would say. I mean, I think I sort of first became aware of this when I read a book of Bill Bryson's. If you're familiar with him at all, he's kind of like a comedic travel writer. And he was just going on and on and on about all the deadly animals in Australia. And I feel also like Steve Irwin,
Look how brave I am for
100%.
traveling.
maybe a little responsible for this. Rest in peace.
We love you, Steve.
Yeah, but as for snakes, Australia does definitely have more than its fair share. And as far as scientists understand at this point, this kind of seems to be down to a founder effect. So what I mean is that about 100 million years ago, Australia split off from the supercontinent Gondwana.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And by about 60 million years ago, through plate tectonics, it had drifted over the South Pole, which killed all the native reptiles because it was cold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
even back then.
yeah, even back then.
Right.
And after it drifted back to warmer latitudes, it just so happened that the first snakes to colonize it were from a venomous snake family, the Elapidae, which was the one I was trying to come up with earlier.
Okay.
And, I think some other snake lineages did join, but it seems like the Elapidae got there first and kind of proliferated and evolved into the species we see today there.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, like, cool. Like, that makes sense. A bit of hype. But underlying all this is a story that isn't really talked about very much, which is that, in fact, very few people in Australia die from encounters with snakes or any other animal. For
Because they
snakes,
stop their tennis matches.
Right, right. Well, only 1 to 2 people a year are killed by snakes in Australia, which is impressive considering how venomous so many of them are.
Yeah.
In India, that number is more than 58,000 people a year.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah, it's
That's a
horrible.
lot.
It's awful. And
Yeah.
other areas of South and Southeast Asia and
How-
Sub-Saharan Africa also have very high incidence of snake bite.
Do you know how much that has to do with the number of bites versus the number of bites that people get treated for and like antivenoms and things like that?
Well,
Does
The
that play a role?
availability of
it's some of
Yeah.
both. It's some of
Bit of
both.
both?
Australia
Okay.
has 2 big advantages. First, it's very sparsely populated. And second, it's rich. So
Right.
yeah.
because it's sparsely populated, people are not all living where a lot of the snakes are.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's rich, like most people in wealthy countries, most people are not working outdoors. And if they do get bitten, they are
Interesting.
likely to be able to access high quality, life-saving medical care, including antivenom, but also, respiratory and circulatory support and stuff. India, of course, most of the opposite is true. It's densely populated. Significant portion of the population works outdoors in rural areas, and most people are poor and unable to access high-quality medical care quickly. They do have, I mentioned those big 4 species in India, like that are responsible for 80% of the snake bites. They do have a quadrivalent snake antivenom that's available. Like, so when people are known to be bitten and like can get to a medical facility first, they're given that and it can help, but it's still a really major public health problem. Yeah, so Australia has more than its fair share of snakes, but it's not that big a deal. Really, other areas of the world that are bearing the burden.
All right. Well, I'll get there someday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Dang.
My sources this week were many, but chiefly Discover Magazine, Live Science, the helpful website of Dr. Martin C. Schmidt of the University of Pittsburgh, who had a list of snakes of North America, the Australian Museum, and New South Wales Environment and Heritage. We are going to take a little break, and when we come back from a break, we will have Kirk.
Woo.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. I want to talk about bird feathers. Shocking, I know,
Who would have guessed?
that I'd want to talk about birds. But
Nerd.
I just think...
Nerd.
Yeah, I'm a bird nerd, totally. Part of what I love about birds is how colorful they are, right? I think that's one of the really appealing things that people are like, get drawn into, observing birds and counting birds and just having pictures of birds on things is they're colorful, sometimes gregarious, sometimes secretive, but these colorful animals. And that the whole color thing I think is really fascinating.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
generally, color in birds comes from 2 different places. There's actually kind of 2 different sources for color in birds. Pigment color, like I think we would most be familiar with and assume, is out there, but then also structural color. And so a couple examples here. I'll try to pick 2 birds that most people have heard of. The northern cardinal, bright red bird, and here in North America, the blue jay.
Right.
We have, which is a
Bright
blue and
blue.
white large jay. So kind of opposite, color birds there. But the cardinal, if you were to take some cardinal feathers, which are that bright red, at least on the male, the bright red male feathers, and put them into like a food grinder, like a coffee grinder, or like even a mortar and pestle, and somehow grind them into a powder, that powder would be red because you'd have the red pigment within the feathers. I don't care if you crush it up, it's still a red pigment, right?
Right.
But interestingly,
I'm so
I
interested to
know-
see where you're going with this, Kirk, because I wrote down a topic today that is kind of similar to maybe where you're going. Anyway, I
well,
go
we'll have
on.
to wait and see.
And I
If
do
you
know
take-
that we've covered bits and pieces of what I think you're going to cover when I've talked about a fish.
I think you're wrong. But anyways, if you take blue feathers, like from a blue jay, and you crush those up, the resulting powder would be gray,
Yep.
Right.
not blue. And that's because there is no blue pigment in blue feathers. That's a structural color. Basically, the shape of the feather itself, of the structure of the feather, is reflecting the blue light rather than there being a pigment whose shape reflects blue light. That may seem like kind of a subtle difference, but one is a pigment that is inside the feather, whereas one is the actual structure of the feather itself.
Yeah.
And
right.
this does make a difference. I was out birding one time on vacation. I was in San Francisco, and I saw some little birds flitting around in a park. And I'm like, oh, cool, some birds. And get the binoculars up, and I'm like, okay, what is this bird? I mean, it looks like my first, impression, the overall impression of this bird is that it was like a house finch, but it was not that kind of purpley, grapey kind of color. It was orange. They were orange birds. And I'm going, what are these like orange finches? Like I've never seen orange finches before. And I looked it up and I'm like, oh, they're house finches. That's a thing that can happen to house finches. Sometimes they don't get enough of the right things in their diet to help them make the pigment. There's some speculation as when it comes to bird pigment that often it's females who are looking at the males and kind of judging them based on their coloration and going, this guy, look, he's really brightly colored. That must mean he is really good at securing high quality food sources. Whereas this guy looks kind of dingy. Maybe it means he's younger. He hasn't quite figured out yet, like how to be an effective bird. Maybe his genetics kind of suck, right? Obviously, they're not thinking all these things through consciously, but they are. There's the thought is that birds are drawn to brighter colored birds because it's going to increase the chance of their offspring being more successful. Because the brighter colored birds are more successful at finding rich, good foods to eat. So that's pretty interesting. I came upon a story recently that I guess it turns out there's something else that can also affect the color of bird pigment in their feathers, and it's not what you might expect. So enter into my story evolutionary ecologist Andrea Romano and his colleagues. And what they were studying is a pretty cool animal, the barn owl. Now, barn owls are one of these owls that's found kind of around the world. They're found in many, many different places. And one of the cool things about that is we can compare barn owls from different parts of the world to kind of see how similar or how different they are. And naturally, we find a lot of variation in the color of barn owls. There's something that's been known for a long time. You look at them and go, oh, this one looks a little bit different than that one, right? These researchers really cataloged where a lot of those different colors variants show up. And when I say colors, some aren't red and some, blue and some purple. This is basically how dark they are, like how dark or light colored they are.
White or cream or light brown, basically.
Yeah,
Right.
versus like a darker brown, yeah.
Yeah.
And what the researchers were able to show in general is that barn owls on islands are paler than mainland mainland-based populations. It's like, okay, interesting. But I'm going to quote Andrea here. He said, however, such a difference disappears on small and remote islands and archipelagos, where in some cases owls are darker than the continental ones. So it's like, okay, so mainland owls tend to be darker. Then you go to islands and they get lighter. But then when you go to like small, more remote islands, they get darker again. And this sort of caught their attention. It was like, this is weird, right? And I think a lot of great science starts with people going, huh, that's interesting, right? I'm gonna look into that a bit more. And it turns out, I guess they wanted to know, like, why were these smaller islands causing darker owls? And I got good news for you. The researchers now think they know at least part of the answer, and it's really weird. So the key realization was that these small remote islands tend to be volcanic in origin.
What?
Interesting. Okay. You know what else is found in abundance on volcanic islands? Sulfur. Now, some previous studies had shown that sulfur can affect the color of animals. So these researchers tested the feathers from locations around the world and discovered that, yes, indeed, birds from areas with like sulfur-rich soils tend to be darker in coloration. As interesting as that is, I do want to point out one thing, though. This isn't like a one-to-one correlation. They actually estimate that the sulfur is responsible for about 10% of the color difference that we see.
Okay.
And they think maybe about 70% of the difference is just genetics, right? Now, if you're even remotely good at math, you'll have the same question I did, which is, 70 plus 10 is 80.
Right.
So what accounts for the other 20% of the difference? And I will tell you, gentle listener, I could find no answer to that question. I think it may just have to do with like the margin of error on the confidence in those numbers. But I was like, that doesn't equal 100. That's real special. So it does look, though, that growing up in a volcanic area can actually make bird feathers darker. This could be an advantage as far as like hiding and giving them better camouflage on an island. Another really interesting hypothesis has to do with the fact that sulfur is not particularly healthy for, most living things.
Right.
It's a toxin. So these researchers had hypothesized that the birds, the reason their feathers are darker is that they're actually converting sulfur in their system into more like melanin. And they're making these darker melanin pigments with that sulfur, because that's one thing you can do. You can convert sulfur into this melanin. And so it could be that they are darker because of essentially like a inherent detoxification process in their bodies. And they're like, we got to do something with this sulfur. Like, I know we can make darker feathers. And so we're literally seeing the results of them detoxifying their bodies by having darker feathers, which is pretty awesome.
That is really cool.
So this is a new area of study. There's still lots of questions. For example, we don't really even know how the sulfur is getting into the birds in the first place.
Yeah, because they're not eating it.
Could be through the air. Well, but I mean, it could be in the food that they eat, right? If they're eating, if the sulfur gets into plants, from the soil to the plants, and plants are eaten by insects, and insects are eaten by, rodents or something like that. I don't know. And then like they're eating those. It's like could be part of the food web, so it's getting it from the food. So they don't really know exactly what the mechanism is. Yeah, bioaccumulation. So then that's kind of a next phase of research. Is like, well, okay, how does the sulfur get in there? But they did show that like the better way to say it is the more recently volcanic activity had happened on the island, the higher the sulfur was going to be, and then the more likely it was for there to be darker colored birds. So very cool. More science to be done, as we say. I think we all know that our environment shapes us, but this story really just stuck out for me because it's such an unexpected like link between sulfur and volcanoes and bird feathers. It's like,
that's wild.
Pretty cool.
That definitely went places I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, and I will say too, like I'm not going into it this week, but like basically they found this in other animals too. It's not just in birds. The sulfur they think can affect the color, the melanin that mammals make and whatnot too for their fur. So it's a cool connection kind of across the board. Wow. That's what I wanted to talk about. I think it's really cool, like sulfur being detoxified into darker feathers. My main source this week was an article about this that was in Science News.
Cool.
Well, that was not
Thanks.
the topic about bird pigmentation that I wrote down. So
I didn't think that's where it was going to go, right?
Okay.
Very cool.
Yeah, I thought you were
Yeah,
going to
well,
be
that's what we
talking about
got.
blue, which I've
Nope.
talked about before. That's wild.
I mean, that's what we got this week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.